Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Human Edge. I'm Kathleen Gabriel, and this is Summer Watson with me today. She's logging in to make sure everything's technically going. And we'd like to welcome you to Your Culture is the Silent Killer: How Startups and Legacy Giants Are Sabotaging Their Own People. And I think this is a topic that has a lot of breadth. I think that, what we're really understanding how much culture impacts our business. And to introduce the two of us, I am a human resources consultant. I work with small businesses to make having employees easy. And Summer is a community empowerment and mentorship consultant and a doctor of psychology, making sure that companies and educational establishments can develop cross-generational mentorship programs and make sure that all of that communication inherent works within your company. So, like to welcome every single person who's watching both right now and in the rewatch.
Yay! I'm so happy that we're both here. We're excited to talk about this. This is like a subject that is dear to both of us. We have talked on this subject many times because it is so impactful for those who run either a startup or more of a legacy business. So that have been in business for some decades or some years. And so we really wanted you to be a part of this discussion because we want to hear from you. Is your culture, is it the silent killer, right? How startups and legacy giants are sabotaging their own people. Why do you think that's happening? I've got a few ideas. Do you mind if I start out with a couple of them?
Please start out with a couple ideas.
And the first thing I really want to start out with is something foundational, really foundational mistakes in culture building. And from the perspective of startups, many startups really glorify that hustle culture. Let's go, and make you feel like, oh my gosh, got to get on that, got to do that, got to do it right now, got to do it yesterday. And they are prizing long hours and constant urgency as signs of commitment.
Yes.
And that's huge. I mean, when startups start, they've got all these people on their team and they want to hustle, they want to go. So what does this create? This creates environments where burnout is common. It's super common, and personal well-being is an afterthought. It's a tag. It's not something that's embedded into their strategy. It's not people first. It glorifies, let's go, let's do this, let's get this done. Now, when you're talking about a legacy company or an older company, it often relies on very rigid tactics, such as hierarchies, outdated systems, things that they can control, people that they can control. And these structures can stifle creativity, silo communication, discourage open dialogue. This can do so much to really build silos around their people. And overall, foundationally, this is a big mistake. These aren't culture building, these are culture breaking. And so these are things that break the culture, because when you strategize, you didn't really think about hashtag people first, right? And what that really means. What does that mean to you? If you're out there listening, if you own a startup, I know I've been part of a startup. I am a startup in certain ways, and especially when it comes to certain programs. And we want to get out there and we want to get it quick. And I remember, and I'm going to give you an example. I remember starting the podcast, Core Women Podcast, over 7 years ago now. I knew nothing about podcasting. And I was working with this young man who was going to college. And I was like, we need to build a website. We need to do all these things. We need to get the podcast out there. What do I use? What's the microphone? What's the platform? I was like, we need to do it now.
Mhm.
It was like,
Yes.
it was like the girl from Willy Wonka, I want that golden egg and I
Yeah.
want it now, Daddy. Right. So
Yes. Yes. Okay, Veruca, you got it now.
there you go. There you go. Faruka, right? And I remember that urgency, and that was not healthy for me. That was not healthy for him. And we worked it out. And I had to get realigned. I needed to realign myself, take a breather, and really think, what's going to help the situation? How can I just take a step back and think about, how do I want to build this? What do
Yeah,
I want to look, what do I want this to look like, feel like? What do I want emotionally to bring into this? Where's that emotional awareness in
yeah,
regards to, because every piece of energy, every bit of energy that is brought into a project, brought into a company, can look and feel very different for those that work with you, even for the product, itself, the service that you're providing. And if you're, functioning at this level where you're just anxious, and it's go 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 go, people can feel that, people can see that.
well, and going back to what you said about the difference between startups and legacy companies, one of the things that I've noticed is startups tend to come in with this attitude of, "We'll figure out the culture later. We need the product now, we need the sales now, and the culture will figure itself out later." And then legacy companies, the attitude is, "We've already figured out the culture. We have a culture. What do we need to think about? Because that part's done."
Yeah.
And both of those attitudes ignore the fact that the culture is doing its own thing while you're ignoring it.
Exactly. And furthermore, the reason I say this is foundational and to recognize these things is because, did you, while you were strategizing, come in with a people first strategy rather than it being like an afterthought?
And odds are good, like, we have more and more companies that are recognizing that a people first strategy is profitable. And it also, like, just takes stress off your own plate, so win-win.
Yeah.
But in terms of
The reason I say this is
doing
so
business.
sorry.
Oh, here we go.
We're on
You
LinkedIn
know?
too. Go ahead.
Technology, man. But yeah, so it really comes down to, are you thinking about why you have the people that you have doing the things you need them to do, and how you want to treat them, and therefore what you expect to get from that synergistic communication and collaboration with these people? Because people aren't cogs. You don't
Yeah.
collaborate with a cog. You
Yeah.
collaborate with another human being. And if you take this mindset instead of, "I'm in charge and I tell everyone what to do," it's more or along the mindset of, "I'm a decision maker, and yeah, at a certain point, the buck stops somewhere. It stops at the top." So there's all of these different ways to look at it. But if you're not looking at people first, you're looking at people as disposable, and you're looking at a lot of extra costs of lost productivity and high turnover.
Oh, you
And
said
that's
it
bad business.
beautifully. That was beautifully said. And again, I'm going to tack on to this: failure to prioritize people in strategy can lead to exactly what you were talking about. And you summarized that greatly. And let me talk about startups. So startups really drive to scale, right? They want to scale, and they want to scale quickly. So they see people as resources. They see them as resources and not, as you said, partners, not as
Yeah,
collaborators. And
yeah.
that's a sad situation, because if they were seen as collaborators, as partners, that would be part of your strategy to build into your culture, versus, hey, they're just a resource. They're a resource for our tech. They're a resource for this. They're a resource for that. No, they are people.
Well, and in your own work in community building, what
Yes.
have you seen in terms of change when that mindset changes? Because there's definitely a large difference between, these people are fungible and we can, you're lucky to have a job, and
Oh,
people,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and people are replaceable and all of these things. What happens when you change that mindset and that practice from, whatever, replaceable, to we're in community with mutual goals?
Absolutely. And here's the opposite end of those startups, is the legacy, right? The legacy
Mhm.
companies and what they're doing. They're doing like strategic planning and legacy, which is frequently centers on profit. It centers on market share. It centers on tradition. Well, we've been doing it this way, and this way works. Well, maybe it's not working so well. because you do have to look at your stats and look at how much or what's your turnover look like. Are you keeping these people? Are they happy? Is there a sense of belonging? What kind of culture are you creating? I want to go back to something you said, Kathleen,
Yeah.
about creating culture, right? And when you develop either a company or you're trying to develop a program, I've done this throughout my decades of work with people, right? That it's not just a program, it's people.
Yeah.
People who want to feel invested in the program. People who maybe, I'll give you an example. So years ago when I started out my career in human services, I started working for nonprofit. And boy, did that put me through some of the paces of really, really learning to work with community, work with people to make change, right? And one of the things my mentor said to me is, it's not about going in there and making the change. It's about going in there and embracing the people to help make the change, right?
Yes.
And I was just like, okay, what does that mean? Tell me more. I want to learn. I want to grow from this. And she said, well, you don't go in there. And I was 20 something, right? Probably, well, more along 26 or something like that. But you're learning systems, you're learning about community systems, you're learning about work systems, you're learning about all these different things. And I thank God I have that mentor, right? And I
Yeah.
could ask her questions and I felt comfortable and I felt like she created a safe space for that. But outside of that, when I went into these communities, it wasn't about bulldozing. It wasn't about, okay, we're going to come in and we're going to make these changes, because not only did I work in that one collaboration inside of a community, but I worked in different schools within a district, right? And so every school even looked different. But here's what made the switch to growth, to really making movement and development with that program that we were trying to integrate into the community or into the school, is by asking people to be a part of the change. What did
Yes.
they want to see? How were they feeling about the change? And let me tell you, it first started there. How did they feel about the change? And a lot of times
Yes.
they were like, nope, we don't want to see it. We don't know who it's from. We don't trust you people. We don't. And trust had a lot to do with it.
Because change is hard. And to your point, have you heard of the term the IKEA effect?
No.
Okay, so there was some studies done
Okay.
about people's investment, personal
Okay.
investment in things, in
Okay.
outcomes, in objects.
Okay.
And they did 2 groups, one of which had, like, an IKEA flat pack thing that they had to build, and
Okay.
the other that was built for them. And each group was asked, "What do you think this would be worth to you?"
Hmm.
And every time, the people who built it themselves valued it higher. And that was a surprise because reasonably speaking, you'd think, well, pre-made furniture would be more expensive, right? That would be more valuable. But no, when people invest their time and effort, that is more valuable. And that is the IKEA effect. People value the things that they're able to invest in, and that transfers over to
Yeah.
every part of work, because you're absolutely right. If people are able to say, "I contributed to this decision, I contributed to this success, I had a say," even if all of my suggestions or ideas weren't implemented for all various reasons, there's still that investment of, when I'm in the group. Whereas if I'm
Yes.
being told what to do, I'm not in the group.
Yeah.
That's not worth much to me.
Wow, I love that example, and you're so right. Okay, so I've got some really cool furniture from like all the different countries that I've been to, or those countries that I've lived in, right? But I
Yeah.
have to tell you, I still have pieces of IKEA furniture like down in my basement or whatever, and I'm
Mhm.
like, that bureau right there took us a long time to build. I
Yes.
remember when my husband and I started out, I think when we got married, we were 24. And of
Mhm.
course, where are you going to go? IKEA, right?
Yeah,
And we were
of
in
course.
San Diego at the time. My husband was a Marine, active duty Marine at the time. And so we would go down to IKEA, and one night we bought all this furniture. One night we spent all night putting that stuff together, all
Yeah.
night. you know how many pieces some of that stuff comes with,
Yes, I
some things to hold our dishes, some things to hold, our clothes, some things to like, oh my gosh. And we still have a couple of those pieces. And I'm like, I will not get rid of you. You will
right.
go with me. And some of those pieces, I look back to what they're making now or then versus now. I'm like, those were heavy duty.
Yeah. And all of that
Yeah.
comes back to you have a personal connection
Oh, yeah.
with those pieces. You have a personal connection to the memory of
Yes.
spending all night working on this thing,
Exactly.
and it's that contribution and community and joining together and having a say
Yeah.
and feeling
Absolutely.
accomplished,
Yeah.
and everyone wants that. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter how big or small the organization is.
Right.
And you ignore that at your peril. If
Yeah.
you're a business owner or a business leader, you ignore the humanity of your people at your peril. And you are able, okay, you might think, hey, I'm in a legacy company and I'm not the owner. Like, I'm not the CEO of this Fortune 500 company. I'm a team leader. And
Yeah.
you know what? You can still affect cultural change within your team. You can be
Okay.
the kind of leader to guide people through a cultural change. Go for it, Summer.
You did an incredible segue to something that I want to bring up, and that's leadership gaps at all levels.
Yes.
Gaps at all. So your segue was amazing.
Thank
So
you.
you're welcome. It gaps at all levels. So it doesn't
I
matter if
I
you're
didn't
somebody.
have the outline ahead of time, I assure you.
No, it's like, wow, okay, here we are. You flowed right into the next thing I wanted to talk about is
Great.
leadership gaps at all levels. That means from the point that you come into a company to the point that you've been there for decades, right? And
Yeah.
so, a couple of the things, and I like separating this out a little bit between startups and legacies, is that startups in really value some of those inexperienced leaders, but they're often put into or promoted for speed or for vision without proper mentorship or training. Now, on the other hand, legacy companies have tenured leaders, right, that can become resistant to change, clinging to control instead of cultivating leadership in others. And that creates silos, that creates gatekeeping, that creates stereotyping, that creates so many different things that people become not part of.
Yeah.
They don't feel part of. Or if those startups, promote because of speed or because of vision, but they don't have a great way of teaching those folks about the system that they're trying to create, then they're going to have a more difficult time in relation to on the down the road, maybe communicating with these people because they were valued for that vision and they were valued for that speed and they're going so quickly, but maybe they're unclear of the expectations. Maybe they're unclear of the long-term goals. Maybe they're more reactive than responsive. And so, they're going to be challenged as well. So if you look at these two types of structures, whether you're a startup or maybe a legacy company, if you're doing these things, take a step back.
Yeah.
There's something that I'm going to actually be facilitating today, and it just came to mind. I want to leave you with this too, something that you can actually use, and it's called, think of the letters RPCR. RPCR. And when
Okay.
you think of those letters, they stand for recognize how you're feeling as you're going through this process. Whether it's a legacy company, whether it's a startup, recognize, pause to understand your own feelings, whether that is going into a group, starting a new program, how you're training your new folks, if you're mentoring, not mentoring, then choose how you're going to respond. Now, what I always say at this point when you're looking at this RPC our framework is when you choose to look at how you're going to respond or how you're going to work out a certain issue or a certain dynamic, think about what you want the end result to look like
Yeah.
first, because that's going to stop you. That's where that pause, that breath, that Stepping back, that objectivity, it gives you that pause, gives you that objectivity to choose what you want the end result to look like. And part of that end result we're talking about here is embedding a people first strategy. So when you take that opportunity to pause, when you take that opportunity to choose how you want to respond and what you want your strategy to look like in relation to people first, then you respond.
Yeah.
Then you respond. You can put together that great strategy. You can start working effectively with the folks that are around you because, like you said earlier, people want to belong. That's part of Adlerian psychology too, is that people want to feel a sense of belonging. And when they don't, guess what happens? They build silos around themselves. They stop communicating. They pull back. They may even start depressing, or they leave.
Yeah.
Or they leave.
And we have that term now, quiet quitting.
Yes.
I don't believe in quiet quitting. I that's it to me, it's the same thing that's been happened, tale as old as time, is that
Yes.
disengaged people disengage.
That's right.
And all that quiet quitting is people stay in your company and they're like, "I will do the absolute minimum it takes for you to keep paying me."
Yeah.
And that is a way to go. And I'm not even talking about the employees, I'm talking about your company. Your company guiding people to a place where they're so frustrated that they're like, "I'll do the minimum until you fire me." That is not all them. You can put it onto the employee and say, "That's someone with a bad attitude." I mean, maybe, but also maybe it's a culture with a bad attitude. Maybe it's a culture that guides people towards more engagement isn't rewarded. More
Mhm.
engagement doesn't get me anywhere, so why would I put in more?
Yeah.
Because I have so few hours in this precious life of mine. Why would I give all of them to you when I get nothing in return?
Yeah.
And so build a culture where people feel engaged and important and seen and heard. And even on those frustrating days when they're like, "I can't believe we're going in this direction," you still have the foundation of, "But we do pretty good in general, so I guess I'll just ride this one out."
Yeah.
Or, "I trust that even though I don't understand or agree with or whatever the strategy that we're going towards, I understand our overarching goals, and I'm on board for that." And that's every level. You have to see every employee as deeply important because the minute that you start going down the path of unskilled labor or cheap employees or whatever it is, that's when you start saying, "Those people don't matter, I'm not gonna listen to them." And that's the crack in your foundation.
Absolutely. You know, it's so interesting that you mentioned this because I'm going to be doing a talk at 3 p.m. Eastern time today, right?
Nice.
And one of the things, my fourth slide for that slide deck is actually part of what you said. And I'm going to give you the example of what I'm going to talk about there.
Mhm.
And it's why academic institutions are built on collaboration, but run on silos,
Oh, that's huge because
right?
that is
So
absolutely standard.
the way it relates to what you said, so universities tend to thrive because of departments and programs and people working across boundaries to solve shared challenges. But in practice, many faculty and staff stay in their academic lane, not because it's not my job, but it's exactly what you said. Not because they don't care, but because crossing lines feels unsafe.
Yes.
Crossing lines feels unclear. Crossing lines feels emotionally taxing. So when they have that self awareness and it's low, people may not realize that they're gatekeeping,
Yeah.
that they're excluding or creating miscommunication or siloing communication because they value certain things tremendously. So when they're doing that, it's kind of like that legacy program that says we've been doing this for years and we value A, B, and C. So they almost are creating some walls for that innovation. They're creating some walls for that co-creation and that communication, because they're creating silos, even if they value these things. And so the new people, or the people that may have been there working on a new program, may say, well, that's not my lane, so I don't feel comfortable, or I feel unsafe, or it's unclear if I should cross those lanes.
Yeah.
So
No,
it
absolutely.
it relates to exactly what you were saying about, you may have this great culture, but in some regards, it's creating some things that really aren't harnessing the culture that you want it to harness. It's like you value certain things, but things are not in alignment exactly. And guess what? We've got 5 generations out there. I talk about this all the time. We've got 5 generations who have different thoughts, different values, different ways of thinking, communicating. And if you're a company that values certain things, which might be tremendous and wonderful, you might also be excluding for different reasons. You
Yeah.
might be creating silos and communication silos for different reasons that you may not be aware of. So it's important to have that people first strategy, because then you're going to be able to really get a better idea of how your people work, how they might feel a sense of belonging, where they might be able to cross lanes and say that it's okay to create this, and create an environment where people are actually functioning and have that emotional agility to be able to adapt to different situations, even if they're new and feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, are you creating that kind of culture to really break down certain things that have been within your legacy company, or certain things that maybe even with the startup that you started out really strong and really fast and really supercharged, where other people feel like, oh gosh, maybe taking that a little bit slower, they're not ready
Yeah.
for, or maybe they don't want to hear that.
Or, especially with startups, the people who are there with you at the very, very, very beginning,
Yeah.
in the best possible scenario, we're there with you the whole ride.
Yes.
But honestly, lots of times the move fast and break things people, they don't wanna be in your, 500-person company with 1 job instead of 20 jobs. They
Yeah.
want to be in that excitement, and so that's okay. It's okay if the right people at the right time don't continue to be those right people later, as long as you're thinking intentionally, you're treating people with respect, you're communicating, and you're letting people know what's going on with all of that so that everyone can make reasonable decisions for themselves. Maybe you even have an offboarding program where you say, "Look, I'm connected with other startups. You're a startup person. We're no longer really a startup here anymore. How can we get you into a place where you're better?" Because if you have that human first perspective, that means that in the marketplace, you are going to be leaps and bounds above your competition in terms of, are you a good place to work? Do people, even before they've joined you, want to invest in working with you? And all of that investment also comes down to training, because we talk about, hey, this is how the results that we want to get. And the only way to get those results are investing in structure, really thinking about what do you want to practice and what results do you want from that practice? And training, training, training. Always bring people on board. Always bring people into the fold to say, this is how we do it, because just like any part of management, it takes training to say, that's how you get that result. Just like what you were talking about before, of when you want to react to something, you know, train people to pause, train people to reflect, train people to take a moment before they react. Because
Yeah.
honestly, in all of our lives, where do we get that training from? Therapy, maybe.
Yeah, right. Or coaching, right?
Yeah,
Coaching, therapy, exactly. Because a lot of times our training comes from what was modeled, right?
yeah,
And what I would say to this too is, if you're in a startup or if you're in a legacy company, ask for a mentor, right? Or seek out
yes,
mentorship. Or if they have a mentorship program, ask what that's all about. Because let me tell you, I've got friends who are directors for different businesses or for counties, and they all along their journey, their professional journey, have had mentorship. And that has helped them get from one step to another to another. And if they didn't find a kind of a working relationship with that mentor, they went to find another. And
Yeah.
that's okay, right? That's okay to do. Now, one of the last things I want to bring up too is our misaligned communication when it comes to generations, across generations. And for startups, it could be, oh, we love that innovation, we love the young folks are coming on, and yet that omits that wisdom from people who might be a bit older or who have worked in the industry for a while. So you're negating that wisdom, right? And so it's going to make those folks feel like, oh gosh, do I really belong here? Number one, right? And that's at a startup. And then legacy, it's the opposite, right? Where you have many legacy firms that have had the same type of communication or the same type of behavior and functioning for decades, right? Or for many years. And what does that do? That creates a disconnect with potentially our younger generations because it's we've done this, we've been this way, we've acted this way, we've talked this way, we've communicated this way, and we've heard this in our own families,
Right.
right? And so it's like we've always done it this way. I mean, I have talked to people just recently too about, about maybe certain things in regards to politics. And I got a response from a friend saying, "Well, my father believed that, so I believe that." And I was like, "Wait a second. What?
Yeah.
Wait a second, right?" And again, that's not a problem if you did your research, if you understood what that meant, if you really valued that, right? Hey, I wrote a book called F Yeah, Get Real with Strong Language, and it wasn't about the strong language itself. It was about using strong language to really identify your own values and if you're in alignment with those values. We use it as a medium for that, right? And this is what this is talking about in regards to legacy companies. Just because you've been doing it that way, do you align with those values? Are you open to new ideas? Are you open to the innovation, the culture change, creating more connection, less disconnection, right? So it's think about, again, I'm going to say RPCR, recognize, pause, choose, respond, not react, respond. What does that response look like? What does that feel like? And I tell you, if you just walk away with this today, recognize, pause, choose, respond. That's going to really be helpful in any of this culture change, in any of this people first change is thinking about these things, thinking about in this way to be more emotionally agile.
Yeah. No, I love that because that's, I think, one of the missing parts to a lot of what we deal with in the business space
Yeah.
because there is so much pressure. There is so much pressure to be productive, to not make mistakes. And if you're a leader of people, to make sure your people don't make mistakes. And you can have a very emotional reaction to what's happening. Having just some skills in your toolbox to reroute reactiveness,
Yeah.
that's gonna have an extraordinarily positive, effect on you, on your team, on your productivity, and frankly, on your life happiness. So, again, win-win.
Absolutely. And I do want to say this when I talk about like that emotional agility component or emotional awareness, it's not negating those feelings.
Nope.
It's better understanding them.
Yeah.
It's being able to name them, being able to identify them, being able to feel the feels, but then being able to respond and think about that end result that you really want versus react where you may not get that end result because you just were impulsive and just jumped, right? And that's the reaction. So think about what your response is. And with all of this, we've covered so much with regards to culture is the silent killer, how startups and legacies are sabotaging their own people. We've talked about many things from foundational issues to those issues regarding communication, prioritizing people in your strategy. They're not just a resource, they are human beings. Make them part of the culture, not an afterthought. So, with that said, if you want to reach out for us to be of support to you, where can they find you, Kathleen?
I mean, easiest thing right now, especially since we're on LinkedIn, check out my LinkedIn, send me a message from there. Of course, you can also go to, gabrielhr.com, and you can always reach me there. How about you?
Awesome. Well, I think again, because we're on LinkedIn, you could go to Summer Watson, MHS PhD, reach out in the DMs and connect with me. And if you don't want to reach out there, you can always go to Core Women, that's KORE women.com. All right. Awesome. Thanks everyone for watching this. If you watch this in the replay on LinkedIn or on Instagram, perfect. Send us some DMs about with your questions. Or if you'd like to hear us talk about something else, we'll be back in 2 weeks. All right, everyone. Take care. Thanks, Kelly.
Bye.